Well, hey there, it's Catherine from CatherinePuller.com. In this video, we're going to use the Garden Gate die. It's pictured here in the bottom left-hand corner. And we're going to create 6 different cards using 4 techniques. On a recent YouTube live, I created these 2 cards, and unfortunately the audio wasn't working out too great. So I thought I would go ahead and just do a new version of it using the Garden Gate die rather than the interlock die. So let's do that. So since this is a very intricate and detailed die, I used my Gemini Junior and it die cut like a dream. If you have a hand crank machine, you may want to try several different shims and sandwiches and maybe crank it through several times to make sure you get it completely cut out. Now I'm using my two-way glue pen here and I'm coating the back of the die. When the two-way glue pen dries, it becomes a temporary adhesive, so it kind of becomes like a little Post-it note. So then I can press it down onto this piece of watercolor paper and I can ink blend over the top and it won't move around. So I'm starting out with Be Mine and my life-changing brushes, and I'm just doing my ink blending in the center with Be Mine, and then I'm going to do Limoncello and then all that jazz, and we're going to get a really gorgeous rainbow look radiating out from the center of the Garden Gate die. So I'm just going back and using a fairly light hand and just blending back and forth to get a nice blend between. Sometimes we come up with some really interesting colors when blending Caterpillar inks together. Sometimes it's unexpected and super fun to see what shades and tones you're going to get when you blend them together. I decided then that I needed a little bit of purple on there too. So I grabbed my Grape Crush ink pad and I'm just doing around the edges and just going a little bit onto the die. All that jazz and Grape Crush give this really gorgeous kind of indigo color when ink blended together, so I was happy to see that come out. And then the magic happens when you peel off your die or your mask and you get that white behind it. So here are the 2 finished cards. I just grabbed a thanks die and a thank you stamp, mounted them to black layer and then onto the card base, and I was really happy with how these 2 cards came out. So for the next card in technique, this die cut, I passed through the Gemini twice, and I was really excited because I got something a little unexpected. When I pulled the paper out of the die, all the little bits and pieces stayed put. They didn't pull out, they didn't fall out, they just stayed there. So I grabbed a piece of cut and stick paper. It's basically a sticker sheet, so I pulled one side off, added my die to it, cut off all the excess, and then I turned it over and I rubbed it pretty hard because I wanted all of those little bits and pieces to stick to the sticky paper. And then they definitely won't fall out. So here I am just rubbing that down to make sure it all sticks. Later when I'm ready to use it, I'll just peel that backing off. So basically I'm making a big sticker here. Now the one mistake I made, I did not use watercolor paper here, and I should have, but I still ended up being okay. But I would definitely recommend watercolor paper. So I'm taking our new color bursts, which we did in conjunction with Ken Oliver. We did them in some of our Carnivale colors. And I just spritzed that right onto, or just kind of shook those color bursts right onto the die. And then I'm using the Ken Oliver water spray bottle. One thing I really like about this spray bottle is the wide fine mist that I give, and it just works like a dream with the color burst because it just gives this fine wide mist over the whole thing, and then you get this burst of color, and it's amazing. So I want to dry it out because I'm worried about this being regular cardstock. Regular cardstock is not going to take a whole lot of water, so I just wanted to dry it up real quick so that I kind of maintained the integrity of what the cardstock looked like. And then I thought, hey, this would be fun inside a shaker card. So then I went about the business of getting all the shaker bits ready. So I took our postage stamps dies and I used the 2 largest dies and I cut one out inside the other, which created a frame. And then I used this clear sheet of acetate, and that will keep all of the sequins in for my shaker bit. And then I have my 3M mounting tape. I cut it into really skinny strips and then just did my little fence all the way around so that the sequins won't fall out. I doubled up so that the sequins have a little more room, and so I did 2 layers high there. And then I'm going to take the backing off of this die. So remember, it's like a sticker now. So I just peeled that off and I'm adhering it to my cardstock piece, and I'm just going to trim off the ends. Now this cardstock layer is just slightly bigger than our shaker frame element. And then I'm going to take the Crater Lake sequins. I'm going to sprinkle some on top of my gorgeous piece of art and then add that shaker frame right on top. So here is the card finished off with a simple greeting stamped and embossed in white on black. So for the next card, we are going to start with the same element where it's the Garden Gate die cut, and we're going to leave all the pieces on the inside. I have not pulled it out of the die itself yet because I wanted to add this sticky paper on the back and press it down, and then that would minimize my quote-unquote risk of the little pieces coming out when I pulled it out of the die. So just going to rub it on the back so that all the pieces will adhere to the sticky paper. I'm going to cut off the excess, and then I'll be ready for my technique. So I'm taking some fun ink colors. So Mardi Gras and Fiesta blue. I'm using my ink blending brushes, and I'm starting with Mardi Gras in the center, and I'm just kind of playing, going, well, I'm getting pretty dark there, and then a little lighter around the edges. I ended up going dark in the middle, lighter, and then the Fiesta blue is darker around the outside and getting lighter toward the end. That wasn't my original plan, but once I started playing with it, I thought that was a really cool look. So it's a kind of an ombre, but it has the light in between, or where the two colors meet. And I thought that was a really cool look. So just play around with it with the ink blending. You can get it darker if you keep adding color, or you can go really light if you're light-handed and don't sponge over and over and over. It's totally up to you. So I was really happy with how this ink blended die cut piece turned out. It's a really fun way to use this die. And so now what? So I thought it would look absolutely stunning with some glitter. So I grabbed my Wow embossing pad. It wasn't quite juicy enough for me, so I grabbed my re-inking tool and just added some more embossing ink to the pad. And then I'm taking pad to stamp die cut and getting that tackiness all over the die cut. And then I'm going to use the Wanderlust embossing powder. This is a clear, sparkly, gorgeous embossing glitter that Wow created just for us, and we love it. I use this on so many things. So once your heat tool gets hot, it doesn't take long for that embossing glitter to turn shiny. And once it does, you know it's done. So I just kind of hold it in the light, and you can see the difference between the powdery look and the shiny look. And that's how you know it's done. I was really happy with how this technique piece came out. I think it's gorgeous, and it's going to be such a great focal point for my card. So I'm just peeling the backing off of that quote-unquote sticker, and I'm going to add it to this card layer. I'm pressing it down and giving it a nice rub on the back there to make sure all those little pieces get adhered to that card layer. I don't want any of them falling out. And then I'm going to add it to the card front, and I'm trimming off the edges, and I'm making them longer or sticking beyond the layer, which I thought was a fun look. And then I just added a thank die and then a U embossed in white on black. Now the next Garden Gate die, we're going to do some more embossing. So I'm just dabbing this right on top of my Wow embossing pad. You can also do it the other way where, well, there you go. Do it the other way. So put your die down on the paper and then do the embossing pad over the top. One thing you want to remember is that the embossing ink would have gone through onto that scratch paper. So when you put your glitter on it, or the embossing powder on it, it's going to stick to your paper as well. So you can see I turned it over so that wouldn't happen. So I'm using this embossing trio. It's called Riviera by Wow, and it's one of those chunky embossing powders, which is really, really cool. I've used it in several different videos, but I wanted to give it a try and see how it worked on this delicate die cut, because this is a very different embossing powder. It has some fine embossing powder in it, as well as chunky pieces. So those chunky pieces are a little bit different to work with. So they give a marbled look when you're done, but you got to kind of play with it. So you can see here, I don't know if you noticed, but some of those big chunks kind of blew off when I was putting my embossing tool close to the die cut. So what you got to do is when you first start embossing, pull your embossing tool back and have it further away from your project than maybe you might normally do. And then as it gets heat up a little bit, you can pull your tool in closer to your project, and then you won't run the risk of blowing the big pieces off as much. You can also use on the Wow heat tool, there are two settings. There's a lower speed blower and a higher speed blower. Those are not technical terms. And that will help as well. And I did probably about 4 coats of embossing ink and embossing powder to get the look that I was going for. And then at the end, I used Wanderlust because I wanted it to be sparkly. So there's the Wanderlust embossing glitter, and I'm just giving it one final pass. And it has this really cool aqua color with some white and black flecks in it. So it's a cool look. So for the final card, I did an ink blended background, a really light pink using It's a Girl. I did the greeting on the bottom. And I don't know if you noticed, but I cut off the edges of the dies so the shape is a little bit different. I thought that would be a fun alternative. And then I thought I'd do some more embossing. So I pulled out my Mermaid Tails embossing powder. It has some silver and some teal in there and a lot of sparkle. And I basically did the same thing. I heat it, and then I added more embossing ink and then more embossing glitter, and then I heated it again. And I did that about 4 times. I also decided to do the back because I wanted to do something really different with this card. So I decided to make a version of a window card. So I took my postage stamp dies, just like I did in the beginning of the video, and I cut out a frame. And then I wanted to die cut through the front of the card, and I just wanted that second to biggest rectangle through the front, so I clipped the 2 dies apart. And then I have my frame, and I added liquid glue around the whole frame and added my die cut to it. And then I'm trimming off the excess pieces of the Garden Gate die. And then I'm going to remove the rectangle die cut. Now save that for another project. And then I'm going to add more Nuvo liquid glue all around that frame. And then I'm just going to add it to the card front. Since liquid glue takes a couple minutes to set, I just grabbed my big block and added it right on top of my project. And that will help everything get set and flat and dry correctly. And then I have this really unique window card, and it really shows off that Garden Gate die and that gorgeous embossing. So here's a quick look at all of the cards I made in this video. Do you have a favorite? Leave me a comment in the section below and let me know. Subscribe to my channel while you're here, and I will see you again soon.